Good morning, everyone. My name is Mighty Stream, and I'm going to do your December the 20th spiritual principle a day in a meditation. I'm brought to you by Hope Through Navigation, and this is our Hood Recovery Services. You can reach me at recoveryofhope21@gmail.com. The title of today's meditation is Willingness to Serve. We go from simply showing up and reporting for duty each day to a willingness to serve the greater good in the best way we can. That's taken from the Living Clean, Chapter 3, Creative Action of the Spirit in A literature. A lot of us describe ourselves as having been spiritually asleep, bankrupt, or even dead before coming to NA. Some of us find immediate relief when we hear NA described as a spiritual program. We may not be fully willing to let go and dive into a new spiritual journey or continue the one that we had been on before our addiction darkened the path, but the spark is there. Others of us do not take comfort in NA being a spiritual program. We may not know what the word spiritual means, especially as it relates to religious or not religious. It may not feel authentic to describe ourselves as being on a spiritual path or even interested in pursuing one. No matter what our beliefs are or how open-minded we are to challenging them, we're all willing to some degree to show up for ourselves. At the start, we report for recovery duty because we're following suggestions made by other members and because it's making us better. Meetings, steps, sponsorship, a service commitment or two. We build a support system in NA, and we work on developing a relationship with a higher power. Our understanding of spiritual principles and how we're already applying them to our recovery expands. Our willingness becomes more expansive too. We continue to show up for our own healing and because we've made commitments. But our motivation to serve broadens when we follow the suggestions to do so. A desire to contribute to NA and help other addicts slowly blooms within us, and we express it through service. This progress includes sharing about our awakening to the spirit. This progress includes sharing about our awakening to the spiritual aspects of NA and our budding spiritual life. Most of us become willing to let go of our ambivalent or negative preconceived feelings and ideals about spirituality. Though we don't fully understand our transformation, many of us eventually can describe ourselves as spiritually awake, enriched, or alive, in no small part because of our willingness to serve. I'm willing to show up for my own well-being. Am I also willing to do that for the greater good of NA? How will I demonstrate that today? Wow, I made it through that. It seems like I was fumbling the ball all the way through that reading. My goodness, willingness to serve. Well, I thank my higher power for another day of life, for being on the wake up list this morning. I realized that there's several families that are going to be mourning today and mourning throughout the course of the week because not everyone is waking up today. So I just want to express my gratitude to my higher power, to my God, for allowing me to have the breath in my body. And it seems like it's limited breath and I struggle, right? But I'm using the breath within my body for the benefit of others. And that is something that gives me energy. Oftentimes I find myself when people are asking me, how are you really doing? Well, if you listen to me long enough, you can tell that I'm struggling with this upper respiratory infection. And it seems like it's, very difficult sometimes to catch my breath and do the things that I need to do. But if you watch me and you sense my energy and my spirit, you would say, now that seems like two polar opposites. On one hand, on the left hand, she is struggling. But on the right hand, she indicates that because of her love for her higher power and love for humanity, she's able to serve others. And her spirit is gigantua. It's like super huge, it's super big, super large. The spiritual part of me is very healthy and very well. Right. And I realized that this physical part has to line up. I don't let the physical part drag my spirituality into idleness. I let my spirituality, my love for God and humanity and call to serve humanity, I allow that to pull my physical self into alignment. So no matter how rough it sounds, it's going to line up with who I am spiritually. And a lot of people aren't comfortable with that word in Narcotics Anonymous. They don't, a lot of people are. They rather hear spiritual over religious, right? They're comfortable with that. But truth be told, they're not really comfortable with either. Because it's easy to reject religion. It's easy to reject religiosity. It's easy to reject this concept of a God, something greater than yourselves, a higher. It's easy to do that and lay it on the back of that's too organized, that's too rigid, that's too limited for me. That's not who I am. My life is much broader than that. And then now, if it's not that, then we're talking about something of the spirit nature. It's more difficult to work your way around that, right? And so, on one hand, we can say, "Oh, I'm not religious," but then we can also, on the other hand, not be able to claim that we're spiritual, even though it seems quite obvious that that's your preference. You know, I found myself in that dilemma, and I shared this yesterday at a meeting. I found myself in that dilemma where I was saying that I was spiritual, but my actions could not line up. It would have been better for me to say that I was religious, right? Because in religious dogma, right, we know that some people fail that, and there's a negative perception of religion in general throughout the world. It would have been easier for me to fall on that than try to say that I was spiritual. Because now when we're talking about spiritual, we're talking about energy or virtues and principles, right? We're talking about love, kindness, peace, hope, goodness, mildness, goodwill, right? Faith. We're talking about integrity. We're talking about a lot more than, oh, I have a religion, and because of that, I have all these things that are perfunctory that I'm supposed to do or not do. See? So we find people come into the fellowship of Narcotics Anonymous spiritually bankrupt. Let's not even talk about religion. Just let's say spiritually bankrupt. And because of that bankruptcy, they will definitely fall quickly into, oh, thank goodness this is not a spiritual program. But when it comes to time to talking about their spirit getting better, now that is a different story. Is there a measure? Is there a measure for spirituality? Some people would say yes, some would say no, some would say yes. If there is, then that's more like religion. There's all of these philosophical discussions that can take place about spirituality versus religiosity. But one thing I know for certain, two things for sure. A healthy spiritual individual doesn't need to tell you that they're healthy spiritually. You're going to sense it. You're going to feel it in their presence. And depending on where you're at spiritually will determine how you flip that script on them. See, because you can be a spiritual minded individual willing to serve humanity and give back and become productive members of society. And then you get these unhealthy spiritual minds and voices that will tell you you're doing too much. Who do you think you are? I've gone by this name, Mighty Stream, for gosh, I don't even know how long. I don't even use my first name, right? People that call me by my first name, either they knew me when I first got in the program, or they were raised with me, or their family. But I've used the name Mighty Stream for 20 years. I mean, it's been a long time. And so when I share that with people, there's an automatic wall that goes up about that name. And they may choose to use it or not, but here's the point that I'm making. Just because you don't like it doesn't mean that that's not who I am. It describes my whole being. It's something that God gave to me, right? And so you can't take it away from me just because you don't like it because it sounds too powerful, right? And your choice not to use it tells me more about who you are than about who I am. I don't go around, I mean, I introduce myself every morning, right? As Mighty Stream, but it's not something that is a title, right? To allow people to know a little bit about me, but it doesn't explain who I am. You should sense that in the spiritual realm, who I am, right? That the words coming out of my mouth are like a mighty stream that flow, can even smooth hard rocks, right? So I'm just saying that spirituality is something that is oftentimes just felt. And people who struggle with religiosity oftentimes also find themselves struggling with the term spiritual. But this is a spiritual program, so make no mistake. This is a spiritual program. And at some point in time, in order for you to heal and to become better and to recover and be restored to sanity, we're going to have to take a really good look at who we've been, who we are, and where we're trying to go. And we do that in our fourth and fifth step. Now, I hate to take a rabbit trail on this particular topic, but willingness to serve often comes in a spiritual sense in stages. The less about yourself that you're concerned is very spiritual. It's called humility. It's called goodwill towards humanity. It's called agape love. And the more you become spiritual in nature and willing to accept it and work on that, you'll find yourself having more willingness to do the things that lined up with a spiritual being. And quite honestly, doing some of the suggestions that come with Narcotics Anonymous, because it is a spiritual program, it's hard to tear Narcotics Anonymous away from the term spiritual. It's very difficult. It's a coat of armor that fits me perfectly, because in putting on this coat of armor of Narcotics Anonymous, there is this ability to accept my humanity. And in doing that, I have space and I have room to make errors, to be human and make mistakes, to admit who I am, be who I am, and develop. See, there's nothing wrong with that. I could be very spiritual minded, but to be a spiritual being is a whole nother thing. I really, really could break this down a lot more because I love this topic of serving others. I love this topic of serving other people. However, to serve with the right spirit in a spiritual sense is a process. We don't get there overnight, but we can practice it. And the more we practice, we can show up for our own well-being by showing up for the well-being of other individuals. My name is Mighty Stream. I've enjoyed talking to you, and I am absolutely positively going to have the most excellent day. December 20th is going to be the most excellent day I've had thus far this year. I hope the same for you. Talk to you soon.